Payroll management. Making payroll the easiest part of your job for businesses of all sizes throughout northern New England since 1989.
All right. You know, some people call it the polar vortex, but just winter in New Hampshire.
That's it. Wolfboro is somewhat unique, obviously, in that traditional economic development, which tends to be sort of commercial, industrial, isn't always the best fit in Wolfboro. Mm-hmm. Lakeland Pisaki is probably the primary economic drivers, and the properties around it are as well. So water quality issues, and with that comes concern about some of the EPA's 319 water quality monies that we've been using very successfully in town to do stormwater improvements, that sort of thing. So that federal funding on the water quality side is critical for us, A, from an environmental perspective, but B, because the environment is our most critical economic driver, I think.
And we experienced cyanobacteria outbreak Labor Day of all weekends for something to break loose. Right. That if something goes with our water quality, we're in big trouble.
And with that too, I mean, access is king here in Wolfboro in the sense that we're not really well served when it comes to major thoroughfares in the town, and being a tourist community is a huge concern for us. We've spent significant time looking at our Route 28 corridor coming into town, done a lot of comprehensive planning there, and the potential that in 2024 when that project is supposed to be done, that funding may not be there. It's a huge concern for us.
Well, I know the challenges around infrastructure. I was on the executive council for 6 years. We worked on the state's 10-year transportation plan. The needs always outpace the availability of the funds, certainly. And so the state DOT is focused on keeping the good roads good, to the detriment, I think, of a lot of rural roads and a lot of, numbered state highways that don't get the attention that the interstate corridors do. So I got an assignment to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in Congress, and one of the things that we've got to do the next 2 years is to reauthorize the surface transportation funding bill. Because if we don't in 2020, New Hampshire is going to lose 60% of its federal highway aid. Wow. So something certainly needs to be done there to extend that program, because if we don't, projects like Route 28 are going to be kicked out even further than 2024. I'd like to see if New Hampshire could get a bigger share of the pie. We actually get the least amount of federal highway aid of any state in the country. So I think we can...
Why is that?
Well, the way the formula's done, I think we're just a small state geographically, and the formula doesn't recognize the number of road miles and the need across the state. So I think as we reauthorize, we've got to look at how that money's distributed so that we get a fair shake, because we get pennies on the dollar in terms of what we send to Washington back in funding that we can reinvest here. But there seems to be some good bipartisan consensus around it, which is exciting to hear. The president has talked about infrastructure. Leaders in both parties are talking about it. So, obviously we wrestled with this shutdown for the last few weeks, and we saw the implication on a number of programs, from housing to food nutrition to other things. I'm hopeful that we can get that behind us and find the issues where we have commonality. I think infrastructure is definitely one of those. Water quality is another area too, where we've got to make that program permanent to make sure that those dollars can continue to support efforts here. Yes?
Are there things that Wolfboro should be doing to keep the money coming our way in 2024? For the actual project to be implemented? Yeah.
Well, I think it's important for me to know, the stories of, the implications of not doing our job and reauthorizing the funding. The regional planning commissions have generally been a good voice for priorities and local projects at the state level. And so we'll be in close contact with folks at New Hampshire DOT to make sure that there aren't the kind of hitches that could delay a project like this. We'll stay plugged in and I guess well connected, but you should feel free to contact our office anytime if you have thoughts, concerns about things, and we'll work with people at all levels to make sure that projects are getting the attention that they deserve.
I'm a small business owner here in town and on the Economic Development Committee for many years, and it just seems when I look back over the last 40, 45 years,
with where federal dollars have gone when it comes to New Hampshire and come to the Lakes region. It's always been on the other side of the lake. The Winnipesaukee River Basin Project, which was the first attempt in the 1970s to interconnect and to pull up on all those septic systems that were going to the lake, made it around this far, made it as far as Guilford, and made it as far as Center Harbor. And here we are in Wolfboro, left with our own situation and having to deal with it, which has been a real struggle for us because there just is no place for us to really put it, to get it out of here, to get it all the way to Franklin. We've been left on our own in this area. With the highway situation, I don't know if you came in Route 28. Did you come up through Alton Circle?
We actually were in Dover, Rochester,
so you came
Kings
up Route
Highway.
16?
Yeah.
Okay, so you came up the nice road, which basically keeps going.
I've been on 28 though, I've seen it.
Goes straight up to North Conway, and Route 93 goes straight up to the White Mountains. Okay, so Route 28 comes to the end of the Alton line, and that has been resurfaced, as you say, take care of the good roads, and then the ones that really need it. It's cement underneath. There's potholes. We have pictures. We have potholes where the cone's only this much of the cone is showing right now. Here we are in Wolfboro, which is a very, very important community for this entire side of the Lakes region.
You'll see when you're coming in on Route 28, there's a sign, the oldest summer resort in America. So we'd like to keep it real nice.
Right.
And Wolfboro serves as the employment hub for all of the surrounding communities within a half hour. All of the largest employers in the area are housed here, and so it's important not only just to the tourism but the whole region. So.
I mean, it's easy to come here and ask you to go fight for us, which we expect you to do anyway. When you go to
job description.
Washington, D.C., right, to get our share of the federal funding and so forth. But because of our unique situation here, much more than anything else is the general overall economy that is more or less now controlled by the federal government. I happen to be General Manager Emeritus of Goodyear and Hawkins Navy Yard, the oldest marina on Lake Winnipesaukee, and I can tell you without equivocation that the last 2 years have been absolute booming years for us. You can draw your own conclusions from that, but the state of the national economy has affected us in an amazingly positive manner. On top of that, I'm going to interject a little bit of controversy into it. We cannot afford, as a state, as a region, to have the same kind of border problems that we're having now on the southern border. We have a border with a foreign country in the state of New Hampshire. If we start to get a porous border up there, we are going to be hurt dramatically by that. So it's time that we recognize that these issues that are at the national level are really going to drive how well, we perform here. I mean, our very jobs and our livelihood is going to be affected by this. So we need some representation in Washington that's going to fight for the things that we need to continue to grow and prosper.
No, that's well said. A rising tide lifts all boats.
Absolutely.
In ways that we all benefit when the economy is humming and is moving along well. Certainly there are local, highs and lows to that. And so we want you to do well, not just when the economy is going strong, but, to have the tools to keep it going well beyond that. I was actually out with the Coast Guard last weekend, and we, have an ocean border, and they do a great job at protecting us. And I'm on a Coast Guard subcommittee of transportation, and so one of my focuses will be how do we make sure that they can have a modern fleet and have the recruitment avenues in place so that they're doing their jobs at interdicting drugs and other things that potentially could be coming onto our shores here in New Hampshire and other places up and down the East Coast. But I think with respect to border security, our focus should be especially for us here in New Hampshire and along our border with Canada, making sure that the technology is there, there's surveillance equipment, making sure that there's adequate manpower so that we can intercept anything that might be coming across our border. That's, I think, a key for any part of this country where, we border Mexico, Canada, along the coast. There's a lot we have to do, and I think we got to look for ways to be investing in evidence-based solutions. And I think our Border Patrol would benefit from that.
We did see in the last 2 years, at least I did in my business, a drop in European visitors, and other businesses have mentioned that. And also I've asked folks coming in from Canada what their experiences was traveling across our border. While we certainly want to be increasing our security and all of that, we also need to be welcoming the perception that maybe they're not safe here anymore and that it would be very difficult. So that I think it's very important to balance our concerns with security with the fact that we still, that our tourists from Europe, they're very important to come here, and from Canada. You need the security Steve's talking about, not talking about lessening that up, but we've got to have the people there to make sure it goes smoothly and that they still are bienvenue.
Yeah.
And I would hope when you look at that, you listen to the Border Patrol and Homeland Security that are people on the front lines.
Absolutely.
Not listening to people that live in some office somewhere that have never put foot near those dangerous locations.
No, I think you're absolutely right in that regard. And one of the things I hear from a number of businesses, and maybe you've seen this in your own communities, is that there are many seasonal businesses that benefit from H-2B visas in particular, that have had trouble getting the seasonal workers that they depend on to make their business go forward. And so there is some bipartisan legislation that looks at, how do we make sure businesses can get the number of workers that they need to keep things moving.
Yeah, we have businesses right here in our town and in our greater area that are being impacted by that.
Yeah.
Difficult.
So part of that national conversation around, how do we keep us safe? How do we make sure we have a fair and orderly process is also, I think, how do we make sure our economy is allowed to succeed and thrive, because we do depend, quite a bit on, immigration, legal immigration, to ensure that our businesses can function.
I caught a part of a news report last night coming out of Portland, Maine, where the amount of monies that are reserved for people that need it, 90% of that money was going to illegal aliens. What does that do to the rest of the population of that town?
Which community are you talking about?
Portland, Maine.
Okay.
So, and they drew a line from the Mexican border all the way to Portland, Maine that's at 2,300 miles. And that's, how are they getting there? You look at that and you look how it's draining the resources of that town, and the taxpayers are the ones that are getting hit with it.
Yeah.
On another note, a lot of us here are volunteers. Like I volunteer for Denise, as Matt does, but Matt works for the town, and you volunteer for the Board of Selectmen. So a lot of us put in a lot of time. And aside from this, I'm on the Zoning Board of Adjustment, work for Matt there, and also just recently the Wolfboro Energy Committee.
Okay.
So energy is a big part up here, and there's a lot of discussions, and I've only been to, I think, 3 meetings so far. But one of the things, they took a trip down to Sterling, Mass. And saw battery backup systems to help with peak loads and off-peak. And apparently these towns in Massachusetts are having tremendous success with the Department of Energy getting grants to do these type of things.
Okay.
I don't think New Hampshire gets a dime from it. Now, is that the people in New Hampshire that are responsible for this that don't know where to go? I'd like a little bit of help to find out, where do we go for that? How do we turn around and apply for some of these grants to get some of this infrastructure changed? And the electric company that's here in Wolfboro is owned by the town. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be fixed. And having some access to some of those funds would, like you said, you don't want to come here and beg for money, but I just want to know if the funds are available.
Yeah.
How do you turn around and put towards it? Is that something your office could help us with?
Yeah, we can definitely look into that. And New Hampshire struggles with the highest business costs, regionally and nationally. It's a barrier to our businesses to grow, certainly, especially manufacturers. I've been to a number, including in this town, that are having trouble, making sure that they, can sustain those costs over time.
And we have something unique here. We own our own telephone poles because we are own our own electric company. And one of the things that we have is very poor cell coverage and internet. And we need that to grow. I think it was the 4th of July, a lot of the computers went down in town as they were trying to make sales. I know
Credit
last,
card couldn't run
you know,
credit
so
cards.
that's huge, and that my understanding is that they can do things on telephone poles. Well, we're willing to be a pilot program for some of those to come. So if you hear any pilot,
Can you get 5G to come here? That would be really nice.
We can't find it. We don't know where she is. But she wanted to be around somewhere.
Yeah, well, and I think one point to make on that is that you'll hear a lot from rurals in New Hampshire particularly that, you know, it's sort of the last mile service and the very rural areas that need assistance with simple connection. But here it's an issue of capacity where, you know, we are somewhat isolated from the backbone, if you will, of a lot of broadband telecommunications. But our summer residents who are coming from communities like New York City, Boston, they have an expectation of service when they're here. And
so do their grandchildren.
well, they may want to unplug. They also want to keep their grandchildren occupied. So I think that any opportunity that we might have to work with telecommunications companies, remove barriers to communities working with telecommunications companies so that we can more readily implement those technologies in our community would be fantastic. Because I think it's a real opportunity that we have as a town to take a step forward that, like, unlike any other town in New Hampshire, potentially.
How's the cell coverage?
Poor.
Very poor. Very poor.
And even when I moved here 3 years ago, I contacted MetroCast to have cable put in my house. They wanted $13,000 to run the line to my house.
Yeah.
So I ended up with Usenet. Now, I mean, it's better than nothing, but I came from Connecticut where I had a 60 megabit connection, and now I press enter and you go to the you know, you're just waiting for a response. And if a business is operating that way, I'm retired, I can live that way.
Yeah.
But it would be nice, and you hear about all this new technology that AT&T is rolling out with the 5G and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's gigabit service to anybody that can reach a cell tower. It sure would be nice if that went around, and that would solve a boatload of problems for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if as you know, as FirstNet comes online in New Hampshire, if you know, they're going to expand towers in this area. I know they have plans to in other parts of northern New Hampshire. You have to look into.
They don't have any in this particular community, but yeah, it's definitely an opportunity. I think that one of the things, and this is probably not an issue that you can deal with, but the adversarial relationship that is developed between municipalities and the state and telecommunications providers is a huge issue. We get the sense that we're being strong-armed in a lot of cases, and because that relationship exists, these opportunities sometimes pass us by. So I think that however we can foster a more productive relationship there at the federal level, state level, and local level, I think we'll all benefit when we get more access to broadband, particularly as telehealth and other things, you know, become available that might impact a lot of these Asian communities in New Hampshire. I think it's critical technology to look at.
And we have a small little hospital here,
Yeah.
you know, that we could definitely use it. And
We just had a-
connect to some other major hospitals in the state.
Right.
We could do it through.
Heard yesterday on a news report, Vermont is offering a bonus to people that will move to Vermont,
Yes.
work out of their homes, and stay there and create a job that way. They'll pay them a bonus if they stay there for a certain amount of time and do that.
Yeah.
I mean, with
Northern
good
New
communications, you might be able to do it here too.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. The teleworking environment is so good because we have such a wonderful place to raise families.
Yeah.
The recreational opportunities and the school systems that we have are just great, and the teleworking is a very important part. A lot of people do that 1 or 2 days a week and then commute even to Massachusetts so that they can live here because of the quality of life.
Much better lifestyle doing it.
Much better
need,
lifestyle.
what do you need from us to help you to help us?
Well, I think just this. I mean, you've given me some things to think about, some issues to come back at you on after we do a little bit of research. You know, for me, I'm a local person. I grew up in New Hampshire, and I care about local impacts to some of these bigger national concerns. I think when we look at the challenges that New Hampshire faces, and we are well positioned in a number of ways, whether it's the, you know, clean natural environment, good education, generally speaking, you know, a talented workforce. The challenges that we face include we don't have enough young people that are putting down roots in New Hampshire. And that's a statewide problem that is felt more acutely the further north you get in New Hampshire.
What do you think that is?
I think part of it is higher education is quite expensive in New Hampshire. And a lot of our high school grads go off to college somewhere else and never come back to start their careers. I think part of it is that younger people potentially are looking for communities that are maybe more urban and have a lot of amenities. But I think there's a case to be made, and I think, you do such incredible work by volunteering your time and making things happen at the local level. Those kind of partnerships are important between the business community and the public sector, between higher education and business. I think as we continue to develop those, that's one way we can address that head on. Yes?
It would be helpful for you to try to grow the messages, thinking of the Wolfboro as a year-round community.
Yeah.
Because all our businesses are investing in being a year-round business, or at least being sustaining year-round in some way. And what you heard about the broadband, and just seeing your physical response to what happened on July 4th, we don't want to be that story.
Yeah.
And it is keeping us from growing in that way, and it's not there. And part of it is what we talked about earlier, thinking of looking at what's good and making it better. Well, we need help that other communities in the way of broadband already got a long time ago, and it's easy for them.
Were there other things that were identified in the business retention and expansion report that we might not have touched on? I know I think you're entering the implementation phase of the report, is that correct?
One of the things that we have as a real challenge in the town at our peak times is dealing with our parking and our traffic flow and where we put people and how we move people around. So any ideas and resources that you might have to get back to us on would be very helpful in that area.
Do you have any shuttle service or buses that operate?
We have one trolley.
One trolley?
So far, we're a one trolley town.
Okay.
But we're looking at that, and as the owner, one of the owners of that, I'm looking at how I might be able to partner with the town or with even the businesses to do something about that. And so that is in the planning stages.
That's Molly the trolley?
Yeah, Molly the trolley.
Okay.
She's been here for 30 years.
Yeah.
And 30 years ago, she was brought here to try to solve parking problems.
You're doing my daughter's wedding in September.
Well, very good. Congratulations.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So, yes, I'll tell you, I have, personally, all the different concerns. One of the things that bothers me, and I'm most concerned about what's going on in federal government, you're the new guy down there.
Yeah.
You're young. Hopefully you'll be there a long time. If you do a good job, people in New Hampshire probably will. We've got to do something about the deficit. A $1 trillion deficit for 1 year is not acceptable.
Yeah.
We cannot go down there, and one party's called the tax and spend party, and as far as I'm concerned, the other party is the borrow and spend party. And together they make each other happy by making the thing go up like this, and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Someday the government's going to shut down and not be able to pay the bills.
Well, if you go back, my first house in 1981, it was 17% interest. If you went to that level right now, the country would go bankrupt fast. You wouldn't be able to fund their
Absolutely.
bonds.
Well, the debt is approaching 23 trillion.
But $1 trillion in 1 year
Yep,
last year?
and now we're $1 trillion a year in deficits. We are paying more in interest on the debt than we are for the Medicaid program, for the Department of Defense, for a number of the bigger expenditures. And it's unsustainable, because what we're doing is we're paying for things that have already happened in the past, as opposed to priorities and investments that we can make to grow the economic pie and keep the country moving forward. So it's, I'm deeply concerned about it.
You've got to keep it right here,
And,
right in front of you and in front of everybody out there, because that is what's got to
And I think one of the things we have to do, and it's sort of evident in the sort of like the shutdown mentality, where it's like we lurch from one fiscal crisis to the next, and Congress kind of gets it in its own way. We've got to have a more regular budgeting process. I think we need biennial budgeting like we do in New Hampshire, where you can do more long-range planning. If you're just adopting these continuing resolutions every few months,
Add something up, make it a balanced budget.
Yeah, a balanced budget. If you work towards a balanced budget, the problem will eventually go away.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't do it all in 1 year. But
I'd take it a level further and say if Congress can't balance the budget until it's balanced, you guys don't get paid.
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's.
And you don't go home and you stay there 7 days a week and get your job done.
And you don't get
I worked in business for 35 years, and if I didn't have a balanced budget where my sales, I was gone.
I was just gonna say, all our businesses are held to that. All of our nonprofits are held to that.
Yeah.
I know you're new, but didn't want to hit you that hard.
No,
I couldn't miss the opportunity just to mention it to you.
Look, it's a huge problem.
We know you're going to handle it,
And-
Chris. We've got full confidence.
But it can't be swept under the rug, and it can't just be an item of political convenience where we talk about it only when it's election time, right? It's got to be something that we attack head on. So I'm going to try to focus on it in the way that I can. I think as someone who ran a small business, you wouldn't run your business the way the federal government
You
operates.
wouldn't be in business.
There are times where deficit spending is appropriate. I think it's when we're in bad economic times and you need to try to bring things back. This is a time where the economy is doing well. This is not the time where the deficit should be increasing even more, because if the economy turns, it's going to jeopardize.
Nothing to fall back on.
Yeah,
Times
exactly
of war.
right.
Because we're leaving our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
I just want to see that debt clock stop and go backwards $1 a day instead of adding $1 million a month.
In the late 90s, it got to that point, and it was because, a Republican Congress and Bill Clinton worked together to do it.
Okay.
I agree with that. Like you say, what is it, $500 million a month in interest right now? Or it's a huge number like that.
I'm not sure the
On
total
the debt. That's just money that's not being put to work somewhere else.
Absolutely right. It's got to be more than that.
Oh, I thought it was per month. Maybe
That's a week.
Maybe it's a week.
Yeah. That clock is moving fast. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time.
Oh, I'm not talking about the debt. I was just talking interest on the debt.
No,
You might be
It's a significant figure.
It's a lot.
Yeah, we are heading up and stopping at some businesses up in the Mount Washington Valley after this. So I really appreciate you, all coming out, sharing your thoughts. I hope you'll continue to do so. We've got some homework, and we'll be back in touch if you want to leave, your information. We'll circle back with you all. But feel free to call on our office anytime. Carrie is our district director. We have an office in Dover right now. We'll be opening one in Manchester, but we'll be doing regular office hours in every town around the district, including Wolfboro. So.
Well, we really appreciate that you're coming to meet with us.
Yes, thank you so much. We really do.
As I said, part of the job description. So happy to be here, and please don't be a stranger or hesitate if there's anything.
Good.
Yes, thank you very much. Good luck.